I'm Greg King, the Product Manager for FullStack DR. Let's look at some key concepts before delving into the live demo of FullStack DR in the OCI console. FullStack DR is a very sophisticated service for managing and orchestrating the recovery process itself. However, it's not designed to be an installation, configuration, or deployment tool, which means there are no settings to configure either recovery point or recovery time. So, what determines the recovery point for databases and applications? Here are some examples. The recovery point for Oracle databases is determined by the frequency of synchronization you set up when enabling DataGuard using the normal OCI DBAS process for setting up DataGuard. The recovery point for compute instances is determined by the frequency of OCI block or file storage replication you configure when using normal OCI block and FSS services. So, what determines the recovery time for databases and applications? The recovery time for Oracle databases is completely dependent on how long it takes DataGuard to change the standby database to the primary database at the standby region. For other databases, the recovery time will depend on what method you have chosen to back up and restore or recover your databases. The recovery time for compute depends entirely on how long it takes your guest OS on the compute to boot into a fully running state. And the recovery time for applications hosted on the compute depends entirely on how long it takes the application to start after we call your custom start script. The bottom line is you design the data-consistent means of keeping things in sync between regions, and we manage calling the steps to recover or restore your databases using our built-in automation or a custom automation you create on your own. The next few slides all deal with core concepts. We begin with DR protection groups. You will create a logical container in two different OCI regions of your choice. The logical containers are called DR protection groups, or DRPGs. OCI resources that define an application are placed in the DRPGs to ensure they are recovered together. You will associate two protection groups together as peers and assign the role as either primary or standby to each one. The roles of primary and standby are a function of the DR protection groups, not the OCI regions. You don't need to manage the roles. FullStack DR automatically keeps track and manages the roles of the DRPGs as part of the failover or switchover process. DR protection groups contain two different types of containers for objects, members and DR plans. Let's begin with members. As I mentioned before, OCI resources that define an application are placed in a DR protection group to ensure they are recovered together. These are called members. At the time of this presentation, we support movable and non-movable compute instances, Oracle databases, and the block storage containing the boot and block for movable instances as members of a DR protection group. I'll explain movable and non-movable instances in more detail in a moment. We should be releasing a few other member resource types between August and September of 2023 that include file system storage, object storage, and OCI load balancers. The other type of object container within DRPGs define the DR plans. You generate DR plans after adding all the resources that are part of a business system as members of DRPGs. DR plans are all the steps or tasks needed to recover the business system. Most people call these DR runbooks or workflows. Creating a DR plan is very simple. You click on a single button in the standby DRPG to create a DR plan, then choose to generate either a switchover or failover plan. FullStack DR will automatically introspect the members of the primary DRPG, then generate a DR plan pre-populated with all the built-in automation needed to recover those members. The pre-populated steps are grouped into DR plan groups containing similar tasks such as stopping compute instances or triggering DataGuard for one or more databases. You can also completely customize the DR plan by creating many user-defined plan groups containing any custom automation you need executed during a DR operation. Let's explore DR plan types for a moment. There are two different plan types, failover and switchover. You need a minimum of a failover and switchover plan for the DRPG in each region. You will execute a failover plan if your primary region is inaccessible or unusable for any reason. Failover plans only contain steps that are executed at the current standby region as tracked by FullStackDR. You will execute a switchover plan if everything is working normally, but you've scheduled a planned outage for some reason. Unlike failover plans, switchover plans contain steps that are executed at both the primary and standby regions as tracked by FullStackDR. Let's explore the concept of movable versus non-movable compute in a little more detail. Notice that the compute instances only exist in Ashburn on this slide, and block volume groups are being replicated from Ashburn to Phoenix. We will automatically do everything needed to move your compute from the primary region to the standby region during a DR operation. Notice that the compute instances that were in Ashburn are now in Phoenix, and the block volume replication is now going from Phoenix back to Ashburn. If you want us to move your compute instances from the primary region to the standby region during a DR operation, then you will choose to add movable instances and the block volume groups containing boot as members of your DR protection group. Not all applications support being moved from one region to another, so make sure your application can tolerate being started in a different region on the same virtual machine. We have a 3-minute YouTube video that delves a lot deeper into this topic. You should see the link to the YouTube video in the upper right-hand corner just about now. This slide shows the concept of non-movable compute instances. Notice that the compute instances exist in Ashburn and Phoenix, and there is no block storage replication. The virtual machines are always running in both regions and completely independent of each other with their own IPs and host names. Some applications like eBusiness Suite can only tolerate being deployed for DR using this type of deployment architecture. So make sure you know which type of DR strategy your application supports before choosing whether to use movable or non-movable compute. As I said before, movable compute requires block volume replication for the boot and block used by the compute instances. Oracle databases do not use block storage replication. They use DataGuard instead. Non-movable compute instances do not require replicated storage because the virtual machines never moved from the region in which they were initially created. Again, Oracle databases do not use block storage replication. They use DataGuard instead. You'll need to create a failover plan for each DR protection group. DR plans are always created, modified, and executed from the standby DR protection group. Notice the names of the failover plans. If Phoenix is the standby region, then you will execute the failover plan from Phoenix to get things running in Phoenix. FullStackDR will automatically change the roles of the DRPGs as part of a failover, so Ashburn will automatically become the standby region. Whenever you're ready to switch everything back to Ashburn, you will execute the failover plan from the Ashburn DR protection group. Switchover plans function in the same way, so you also need a switchover plan for the DRPGs in each region. I'm going to cover one more concept before we see our short demonstration of FullStackDR in the OCI console. Let's see the difference between a failover process for movable versus non-movable compute instances. All tasks for a failover only occur at the standby region. In contrast, switchovers perform tasks at both the primary and standby regions. This is showing a failover for movable compute. Notice that FullStackDR will automatically perform the DataGuard failover, then activate the replicated storage, launch the replicated compute instances, and then call any custom automation you added to the DR plan. The last slide shows the same kind of failover process for non-movable compute. Notice that there is no replicated storage to activate, and the compute instances are always running at the standby, so there's no reason to do either of these tasks. It is up to you to create whatever automation is needed to prepare, start, and validate the applications. That's it. Let's take a quick tour of FullStackDR and the OCI console next. I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.